Will Syria finally see peace amidst the violence? This comes on the back end of a 2-week truce, which was, according to the Assad regime, planned in the late summer of August. According to an August 16, 2021 article from the Daily Saba entitled Assad Regime Opposition Reached 2-Week Truce in Syria's Deraa. Quote, forces of the Bashar al-Assad regime and the opposition, which are the jihadists, have agreed on a 2-week truce in the south of the war-torn country after talks with the Russian army. A local official has stated, for the past few weeks, regime forces have shelled and clashed with opposition fighters in the area of Deraa al-Ballad in the province of Deraa, the birthplace of the uprising that erupted against Assad's rule in 2011. Since June 24th, regime forces have imposed a siege on Deraa al-Ballad. The opposition surrendered the country of Deraa in 2018 after reaching an agreement with Russia and handed over the heavy weapons. Parts of the city, however, remain under the control of the opposition. On Thursday, United Nations Special Envoy for Syria, Geir Pedersen, expressed concern about violence in southern Syria, in which he said, quote, increased hostilities, which have included heavy shelling and intensified ground clashes, have resulted in civilian casualties. Thousands of civilians have been forced to flee Deraa al-Ballad, end quote. Fast forward 2 weeks later, according to an article written by Al Jazeera, written September 1st, 2021, quote, a 3-day ceasefire has taken hold in the besieged Syria of Deraa after weeks of intense attacks by pro-government forces on the rebel-held enclave, local sources told Al Jazeera. A halt in fighting was announced on Wednesday after Russian generals offered a new plan that appeared to meet some of the rebel demands and involving the Russian military police in patrolling Deraa al-Ballad, the southern district of Deraa City, while allowing for the first time a Syrian army security presence in the stronghold. Rebels said they accepted the plan, while the army said it would give its response on Wednesday to the deal, which also allows the Syrian and Russian flags to be raised in the opposition bastion, but gives Moscow guarantees that Iranian-backed army units cannot act with impunity. Army sources told Reuters news agencies Iranian-backed troops that encircled the rebel enclave for the last 2 months and brought forward reinforcements on Monday would be withdrawn under the deal. State news agency Sana reported some rebels have begun handing over their weapons in Deraa al-Ballad on Wednesday. It added several government-run centers are expected to be open across the city for other rebels to hand over weaponry and settle any pending issues. Meanwhile, independent Syria's news outlet, Step News, said those who refused the terms of the deal would be evacuated to the northwestern Idlib province. It is the last opposition-held bastion in the country where some 3 million people live, half of whom were displaced by previous government offensives in various areas of the country. Elite Syrian forces aided by pro-Iranian militias stepped up the offensive on Tuesday against the rebel enclave in the southwestern pocket bordering Jordan and Israel, according to residents, military, and opposition sources. Fighting escalated earlier this week after the collapse of a Russian peace plan meant to avert an all-out offensive against Deraa al-Ballad, the core city of Deraa that has defied state authority since the surrounding Deraa province was recaptured by Assad forces in 2018. Witnesses and military sources said dozens of improvised missiles were fired into Deraa al-Ballad by the Syrians' military's pro-Iranian 4th Division, which is backed by Iranian-financed local militias. And to make matters worse, according to a Times of Israel article, Israeli strikes said to target Syria. Blast heard near Tel Aviv. The article was written earlier today. Quote, Israeli planes carried out an airstrike near Damascus on Friday. Syrian state media claimed that sounds of explosives were heard in central Israel shortly after. It was not immediately clear if the two events were linked, but the Israeli military were reportedly investigating if the explosions were the result of errant air defense missiles. Syria reported that missiles fired from the direction of Lebanon targeted Damascus, but claimed most was shot down by its air defenses. No sirens sounded. There were no reports of injuries or damage in Israel. Syrian air defense missiles have in the past accidentally shot down a Russian military plane carrying and have also reached Cyprus in error. The IDF did not comment on the alleged strikes in Syria as per its policy. However, a video was published by Sana, reported to show an air defense missile being fired into the air, in which a blast could be heard shortly after. And, quote, it's not the first time that Israeli airstrikes have targeted the besieged country, as we have seen throughout the month of August and even in July. Israel air defense and their air forces bombing the capital of Damascus. According to a Times of Israel article, again, this time in July 20th of 2021, entitled Syria, says Israeli airstrikes target northern Aleppo region. Quote, Israeli aircraft launched a number of missiles at targets near the Syrian city of Aleppo. The official Sana news agency said that Syrian air defenses had repelled the strikes near the town of al-Sadifa, southwest of Aleppo. Syrian war analysts generally dismissed the military's regular claims of interceptions as false, and there were no immediate reports of casualties or damage. Video posted to the social media showed a series of explosions in the area, while a video posted by Sana appeared to show a missile moving through the sky as anti-aircraft fire was directed to it. The IDF did not comment again, which is quite convenient to them. Aleppo is a major city in northern Syria near its border with Turkey and is an uncommon but not unprecedented site for reported Israeli airstrikes. The last reported Israeli airstrikes in the area was September 2020. The IDF has launched hundreds of strikes in Syria since the start of the civil war in 2011 against moves by Iran to establish a permanent military presence and efforts to transport advanced game-changing weapons to terrorist groups in the region, principally Hezbollah, end quote. I think that's rather convenient. What the media will report to you is that Israeli, as well as U.S. and Saudi interests, are and have been funding and assisting Syrian jihadists in the country with military and financial aid, even as well as treating them in hospitals. This was a report, again, by the Times of Israel back in 2017, where the story broke that Israeli IDF were treating, and Israeli hospitals in the Golan Heights were treating members of Jabhat al-Nusra, a Wahhabi terrorist sect fighting the Syrian government, as well as U.S. military coalition forces. Meanwhile, the CIA, as well as the Israeli and Saudi governments, are funding, not covertly, even openly, the Syrian jihadists, hoping they topple the government under Bashar al-Assad. I think what the American people need to do is start asking the right questions. And then hopefully we may get the answers. But even if we don't, and that's a good possibility that we may not, asking the wrong questions will only give us the wrong answers and lead us down into confusion and fear, which is always being taken advantage of by our own government through the legacy media and through the foreign interests of Israel, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf, and anyone else who opposes imperialism and nationalism. We owe it to ourselves to fight against any form of tyranny, foreign or domestic. Wouldn't you say it's high time that we mobilize as a single unit in opposition to a government that doesn't care about us or anyone else? You owe it to yourself.